All right, everybody, with Cycling Strong, we got an amazing interview today with Zipp Wheels. We'll have them introduce themselves just in a second here and have a little fun asking them some questions on their wheels, why they're so amazing, and why they get so much press in all the magazines. So let's have a little background from Zipp Wheels. Go ahead.
All right. Well, my name's Dave Ripley. I do technical PR for Zipp SRAM and Quark, specifically for triathlon, but I have been with Zipp at the Zipp factory now for about 8 years. Kind of covered a few different aspects. Started as a product manager, did product design and management, sales training and education, and now I've been on the marketing side for a couple of years. So touched a few different facets, but I guess that's a quick background on me. And now let's talk about Zipp specifically as a company. Zipp was started in 1978. I'm sorry, is that right? 1988. By a guy named Lee Sargent, who was a Williams F1 composites engineer here in Indianapolis. And within the auto industry and cycling industry, there are a lot of overlaps. Basically, everybody's just trying to figure out how to make people go faster in their vehicle of choice. So Lee, coming from the car side, had a really good composites engineering background, composites manufacturing background, as well as a very solid understanding of aerodynamics and the impact that they can have on cars. He also had a cycling interest, and he's a general tinkerer. I mean, the guy loves to make new stuff and make stuff that other people aren't making. And so he had a friend who was going to Interbike at the time. He went to Interbike with him and saw a lot of what was out there and said, there are better ways to do a lot of this stuff. First thing he started on was a disc, the first carbon composite disc, which he actually named the Zipp, Z-I-P-P. So took that back to Interbike the next year, had like 5 of them, didn't have a booth, just kind of banded his way in and stood out in the hallway and talked to some people and said, hey, I got this, what do you think? And, you know, he did some parlor tricks like standing on it and showing them things like that, but was able to drop, a kilo of weight out of what was the current top-of-the-line cycling disc at the time, and show stiffness improvements and rolling resistance improvements and everything else, and basically everybody was hooked. And so that kind of mindset, you know, there's a better way to do this. We can do this better. That's what started us, and that's still what kind of drives us today.
That is a really, really cool story. I love entrepreneurs that are just innovative, see something, go after it, and try to really tackle a market. That's amazing. That's a great story. So,
yeah.
What differentiates you guys from other wheels? I mean, I've never seen so many carbon wheels as when I went to Interbike this year. I haven't seen a carbon wheel that had carbon spokes in it. And as I walked around, I was just in awe. I'm like, holy cow. Now, this probably isn't the best thing to say, but I've been to another factory, and I saw their testing on wheels and thought, okay, that's really cool. They are really doing some serious testing on these things, you know, but what makes you guys just stand out? I mean, what makes the big difference?
Well, I'm going to answer that a little bit differently than you're asking, if that's okay, because basically, well, I mean, we're going to kind of let the consumer tell us what differentiates us from other wheel manufacturers. We, you know, honestly, we don't really focus a lot on what other people are doing. We focus on what we're doing. You know, and again, going back to the Lee Sargent story, we have never really been in a position where we're going, you know, Zipp is not going to make something to look like what somebody else is doing. We're not going to manufacture something just to fill a SKU. If we can't somehow make it better than what's out there, we're probably not going to do it. We're not going to waste our time. So, you know, we focus on how to make things better than either what we were making before or what we can find available out in the market. And obviously the our real focus for the first 20 odd years was aerodynamics, and the biggest part of what we did was not necessarily just studying and refining our own product, but educating the marketplace. Weight you can feel, stiffness you can feel. Those are tangible. They're easy to measure. They're easy to understand. Which for years, if you hand somebody, let's just say now, I hand you a 404 carbon clincher, and I hand you a 202 tubular, and I say to you, which one is better? Well, I mean, the guy holding the 202 tubular is going to go, oh my gosh, this is so ridiculously light.
Right.
This one feels heavier. It has to be worse. Well, arguably, on a given day, on a given course, a triathlon course, a time trial course, a rolling road race course, that wheel that you felt as not being as good because it felt heavier is going to save you, an order of magnitude of energy efficiency or time, depending on how you want to look at it. That's aerodynamics. And so getting people to understand what it means, how to understand it, how to measure it, and then accept the fact that since you can't specifically feel it on your bike, you got to wait until the end of the race and measure the results and go, well, you know what, I was better. I did better today. So that's, I would say, I think that if I want to go out on a limb and say what consumers think makes Zipp different than other wheel manufacturers, I hope it's that, the fact that we really truly understand the aerodynamics involved in cycling, and that's what we focus on. Like I said, in all honesty, we don't really pay that much attention to what other people are doing because we're too busy working on trying to make what we have better.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I had read a few articles on your wind tunnel studies, and they were very impressive on what you've done there, and the things that you're making leaps in that area, which is it's very commendable. So very cool. Thanks for sharing that information with us.
Yeah, no problem.
What are the top 5 most frequently asked questions that you guys get asked about your wheels?
Weight versus aero would probably be number 1.
Okay.
And the short answer, so we can get through this, the short answer is basically until you start doing climbs of 6.5% gradient repeated or an extended length of time, aero trumps every time as long as you're rolling 16.5 miles an hour or better. So let's say for triathlon, with the exception maybe of the Alpe d'Huez Tri, or the ITU Kitzbühel race, aero's going to win every time. Because, the beauty of it is aero never works against you. Right. And as long as the wheel is appropriately light and appropriately stiff, you get all the rolling resistance and power transfer and everything else you need. And when it's time, for, aero to become the number one resistive force working against you, which is about 16.5 miles an hour, aero wins every time. So that's number 1 question. Number 2, probably right now, is clincher or tubie. And I'm still going to say personal preference on that. Clinchers for years were the training wheel, the all-purpose, wheel, double duty wheel for the guys who couldn't afford just race wheels, but everybody recognized tubies as race wheels. And again, kind of back to what I said to you a second ago, if I can hand you a wheel that's lighter and you believe it's better, then you're going to feel better on it, you're going to have more confidence in it. So tubies were always lighter just because of construction. Clincher tires were not specifically made for performance up until I'd say probably 10 years ago, maybe inside 10 years ago. Then people started paying attention to them. And now there's, a lot of available wind tunnel data and rolling resistance data that, quite honestly says clinchers are faster. So, that's why you see, the majority of the pro field in Kona this year, Ironman World Championships. I mean, we had 11 athletes on Zipp Wheels, and 9 of them were on carbon clinchers. I mean, that's a first. Yeah. So, Third, why do you guys cost so much? I think, you know what, and relatively speaking, this is pretty interesting, and I encourage anybody that's listening to this, go ahead and do some research. Go out and look at a comparable wheel, and I'll say comparable in terms of rim depth, weight, specificity, and you're going to find we're not the leaders in price anymore. We fall actually in the middle of the field. But to kind of justify our price where we've been all along, we manufacture in the United States. Everything is made here. It's just more expensive to do so. Also, you know, traditionally a Zipp rim construction, like the first Firecrest 404, the old Toroidal 404, our rim shapes and our molds really only lasted about 2 years before we would improve them, move on to something else. And let's face it, design and innovation cost money. It's really easy to walk through a hole in the wall if somebody has already knocked a hole in it. But if you're the guy knocking the hole through the wall, you know, it takes time, it hurts, it spends money, and, you know, inevitably, I mean, there's a lot more investment there. So, you know, if you're kind of out there leading the charge and you're the ones breaking ground, you don't have somebody to follow, it's just more expensive. You know, and the last part of that would just be quality of raw materials and construction. We don't cut corners. We don't cut corners on anything. And it's expensive. So, fourth, why do you still manufacture in the United States? Because basically nobody else does. I think there are a couple others. You know, I think there's you know, one or two other rim manufacturers that are still making stuff here. To us, it's circle of influence and control. Within our facility, 73,000 odd square feet or whatever it is, we have design engineers, advanced development engineers, manufacturing, testing, sales and marketing, customer service. So we have that full feedback loop under one roof. It allows us to control our design, control our quality, direct our improvement and innovation all within, basically, 20 feet of separation between each of those groups. And the other aspect of that, just to go into control a little bit more, is we buy American manufactured raw materials because we get more information about those raw materials. We know, like our carbon supplier, it comes with a material certification data sheet that tells us exactly every aspect of that raw material, where it's been from, what's in it, who's touched it. When you're making a wheel as light as it can functionally be, that still has to keep somebody from wrecking their face.
Yeah.
You can't cut corners. You can't skip. You got to know. So again, all that's expensive. And then lastly, what's best for me, right? So what wheel set's best for me? What combination's best for me? And the short answer is the one that makes you feel best on race day. Now, I mean, somebody can say, well, that's a bogus answer. But we make 202 2B clincher, 303 2B clincher, 404 2B clincher, 808 disc, all this, disc brake, rim brake. We make virtually every combination that we can possibly find to give you specifically the wheel set that you need for race day. So if you're climbing Alpe d'Huez, 202 tubulars. If you're racing Ironman, 808 carbon clincher disc. Simple. So, do your homework. Do your research. Figure out the one that's best for you because, hopefully we've filled that void. So that's
awesome. 5. Yeah, that is 5. Great. And 5 descriptive answers, too. Thank you for doing that. Is there 5...
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, is there 5 questions that we should be asking as consumers? I mean, do you have 5 of them really quick you could rattle off that we're not asking that we really should be asking?
How about this? I'm going to roll all 5 into one and say, in order, what are the 5 things I should focus on when I'm going to go spend money on a bike.
Okay.
Because there's a pretty specific grouping there that's not really that subjective. And the first, and this is kind of funny because people don't expect us to say this necessarily. The very first and best money you should spend on a bike is bike fit, because it really doesn't matter what you're on if it doesn't put you in a position where you are comfortable enough to hold it for the whole race, powerful enough to put everything that you trained into your legs onto the road, and lastly, efficient enough to save as much energy as you possibly can. So bike fit is first. Number 2 is wheels, because they're the largest surface area. They actually rotate as well as translate, so they see more surface air than anything else on the bike. Third is components. Make sure your crank length is right. Make sure your bar setup is right. Make sure your drivetrain is optimized and efficient and clean and well maintained. Fourth is the frame, because ultimately you want something under you that is, appropriately light, appropriately stiff, and let's face it, you like it. Yeah. You got to like this stuff. You can have the most optimally performing equipment underneath you, but if you walk out and you go, you know what, that thing's ugly, or it's old, or whatever, then you're not as excited about going and riding it. So make sure what's under you like it. And then fifth, I guess kind of overlays everything, but spend it on yourself. Training, diet, health, nutrition, family, all of those things. Ultimately, I guess those come first, but we're talking about bikes specifically, so I get a pass on that one.
Yeah, good.
That's 5.
I like it. Okay. How do you guys test your wheels so people know that they are safe?
We have a test facility. Actually, we have multiple test facilities within the SRAM organization. But here at the Zipp factory alone, we have a test facility that is, I don't know the actual numbers, maybe 2,500, 3,000 square feet, that has basically every machine of torture and design exploitation that we can think of, and if we can't find it to buy it, we've made it. So we have the UCI impact rig actually specifically duplicated all the way down to measurement specifics in-house. We've got every form of rolling resistance and rolling impact test that we can find or manufacture. So basically everything that a wheel is going to go to out on the road, we test at some measurable percentage above the worst case that wheel is ever going to see on the road. So if we say to you, a wheel set is rated up to a 250-pound rider, we've probably proven that thing's fine up to 300.
Yeah.
If we say that this thing is going to last for X amount of hours, well, we've put it on that bump drum out there and we've run it for X times Y.
Gotcha.
And it was kind of interesting. We just had Pete Jacobs, Ironman World Champion 2012, in here for a tour and some training and PR. And he was going through, and one of the things that he said really kind of jumped out to him as he was leaving was the test facility. He said, because, I think of Zipp Wheels as fast. I know that I'm putting my race and my reputation on the line, and I know that they are doing everything for me that they can to make me fast. I never really stopped and thought that they're keeping me safe.
Yeah.
These things are keeping me from, falling and hurting myself very, very severely. And, your test lab, after seeing that, I can't believe that wasn't the first question I asked. So I thought that was kind of an interesting perspective from a guy who you only think about really as how fast he can go.
Yeah, that's very cool. Good.
Yep.
That's really good to know, and I think consumers need to think about that when they're buying rims. I know that I'm not saying that everybody doesn't do that, but I I most definitely, when looking at a rim, would be thinking about that if I were them. I mean, I know I do. So
yeah,
that's
well,
very
the one specific technology that I will kind of highlight in this discussion is carbon clinchers. Probably for 4 or 5 years, when even back when I was product development and product management, people were asking, when are you going to make carbon clincher? When are you going to make carbon clincher? Everybody else is making carbon clinchers. Well, the short answer was, we will make a carbon clincher when we can put those 6 decals on there that everybody knows, they can trust. Well,
right.
I mean, we couldn't do it for a long time, because we could fail them in ways that there was a potential you could replicate in real world. And until we got to the point, from a manufacturing design and material specificity, where we could not fail these things until a pretty highly measurable percentage over what you can see in the real world, they never saw the light of day. And, to this day, our returns on carbon clincher technology is in single digits.
Awesome.
And we've been doing this for 4 years now.
That's
so
amazing.
Obviously I can't say how many wheels we put out a year, but
right.
let's just say a single digit return ratio, and I even say at this point, I say it's under 5, where somebody, other than just specifically piling them into a curb,
right,
they have failed for some reason. And again, you're talking into the multiple decimal points of a percentage point of what we've produced. So that's a good example of I mean, if we can't do it better, and we can't do it so that we can put those 6 decals on it, it's not going to happen.
Awesome. A couple more questions that I have. Well, actually, 3 more that I want to get through is, why do you put the dimples in your wheels? Is it the same reason that they do for golf balls, or is it aero reasons, or?
Well, yes. The short answer is yes. It is for aero reasons. Basically, what the dimples do is they act as like a trip strip, or I don't know what the terminology is even anymore. But if you look at the leading edge of an airplane wing, just as you come past that leading edge radius, you're going to see something. Strip of sand paint, a little metal tab sticking up, specifically angled in a certain way. It's a vorticity strip or a vortex generator, and as that leading edge air comes up over the front radius of an airplane wing or around a bicycle tire, it gets to the rim surface and it has to make a decision, because air's just sitting there minding its own business. The wheel is punching its way through it. So it puts the air into a high pressure situation all of a sudden, and that air has to say, okay, am I going left, right, up, down? Once it makes that decision and it starts around, it hits that rim surface, those little pockets of air that are trapped inside those dimples give that oncoming air something to ride across, as opposed to hitting the sheer surface of the rim. So air on air has less resistance and moves easier and is less reactive than air on a sheer surface. So that's a long story.
Okay. The other question I have for you is hubs. How important are hubs? I know a lot of people, build hubs. They do different things, but how important is that hub with a nice wheel?
Well, I'll start with this. The truth is, most people don't care about hubs unless they don't work. So that's the starting point. So then it's a matter of defining what is work. So, if you're building a wheel set that has weight in mind, the hubs are a big part of that equation. So you can build a hub that is ultimately bomb-proof, and you will never have to worry about again, but you could be adding, 250, 300 grams of unnecessary weight into the product. Or you can build a hub that's so light that enables you to get a wheel set, let's say under that magical 1,000-gram mark. But if that hub is so flimsy or potentially has flaws, it could break, it can flex, it can do all sorts of things. that are going to rob your wheel from performance. So hubs have to be as good as the entire wheel set is as a benchmark. And then, you know, the more of a performance expectation you put on that wheel set, the better the hub has to be, or at that point it starts to not work. Does that make sense?
You bet. Absolutely.
Okay.
So kind of a wrap-up question is, how do people find your wheels? How do they try them out? And what's your warranty and guarantee on them to them as a consumer?
As of right now, pretty much every North American dealer has access to or participates in our wheel demo program. So you should be able to go to a local Zipp dealer and say, hey, I want to try a wheel. If they don't have them, they can get them. They can get them for you. We also have SRAM's mobile red ride experience that travels around the country, goes to dealers, goes to events, and we have a full fleet of, you know, really cool, you know, tricked out. You know, I don't even know what frames they use right now, but we work with several different industry partners to you know, basically let people try our stuff, and whether it be a SRAM drivetrain, a Zipp wheel set, a Zipp handlebar, you know, you can go try it on some sort of a high-end bike that should be something that you either know or your buddy has or you've read about. And so those are available all over the place, and you can find, you know, the SRAM mobile ride experience on SRAM.com or typically, you know, watch you know, the Zipp Facebook or SRAM Facebook or somewhere, because we'll usually tell you where they're going to be.
Awesome.
We have a I would say go on to Zipp.com and look specifically for warranty information and crash replacement, because it's all on there. You know,
okay.
we're pretty, you know, we're pretty solid with what we do. So everything we have is usually, you know, up there, you know, within, you know, whatever the rest of the industry is offering in terms of that. So
great. Well, what a great interview, and thank you so much for all the time. Absolute amazing knowledge that you've shared with us. I think the number one thing I took away was aero versus weight climbing a hill at the 6%, or I can't remember the exact mile an hour you said, but that was really pretty cool for me. I love to climb hills, and I'll be doing Leadville again this year on my mountain bike and stuff like that. So it always is an interesting thing to think about, is weight versus aero. But this will be my first year to actually get a set of Zipp wheels. I ordered a bike that's got those on, so I'm excited to try them out and
nice.
See how they do for me this year. So
well, good. Well, you know, keep us posted. We love feedback.
You bet. Would love to do that. Well, thanks for taking time and doing this with us today and sharing your knowledge with us on Zipp wheels. We appreciate it.
Yeah. No, my pleasure. Stay in touch.